Right before Jesus teaches us how to pray, before he gives us the Lord's Prayer, Jesus gives us this little primer on how not to pray. And he gives us three little categories, three ways of thinking about the ways that prayer can go sideways. I've framed them this way: the hypocrites who use prayer as a means to an end, the publicists who use prayer as a practice in image management, and finally, the pagans who use prayer as a way to manipulate the divine. This one is about the hypocrites. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites. Now that line in verse 5 is actually a callback to the previous paragraph where Jesus also tells us not to give to the needy the way that the hypocrites do. First off, just know this, write this down. All the hypocrites in your life, all those people that you can't stand, they're out there doing a lot of praying, giving a lot of money away to the poor. Maybe don't be so hard on them after all, okay? I mean, good for you, hypocrites. Credit where credit is due, am I right? And yes, I know that is not Jesus' point, but at the same time, as I was reading it this week, I realized maybe it's not such a bad idea for me to remind myself from time to time that whether or not I like someone, that isn't the end of their story. There's more to them. That's it. Why is Jesus so choked here? We should talk about that. Because I don't think that what Jesus wants is for us to fall into a paralysis of self-analysis. Like, if I can't be sure that my motives are 100% pure, does that mean I should not pursue doing good in the world? Or if, let's say, I run a business and I make my living from that and I feed my family, does that mean that I can't consider the good that I accomplish at work part of my faithful stewardship in the world? Well, I would say no. Although to be candid, I make a living in large part standing and reading prayer, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but I would say, particularly when we're changing course in our lives, trying to make changes for the better, oftentimes, most of the time, maybe even all of the time, our motives are a jumble of conflicting intentions. That in itself does not make you a hypocrite. That makes you human. In fact, I would argue that the more aware and the more honest you are with yourself about all of the conflicting intentions and emotions that drive your movements in the world, the less chance there is for you to fall into that vacuum of hypocrisy. The goal here is not to immobilize ourselves with unrealistic purity tests. The goal is to not let our conflicts go unnamed within our own heart. So, for an example here, if I'm honest with the fact that I really like my job, and I love public speaking, and I enjoy getting up in front of you every week to tell you what I've been thinking and I've been wrestling with, that's not hypocritical. Hypocritical would be me pretending that there's no relationship between my ego and my career. There is. Jesus is not talking about some mythical reality where you get to live your life without conflicting intention. Jesus is talking about when you give yourself over to playing a role. And maybe you already know this, but the word that Jesus uses here, hypocrites in Greek, is literally the word hypocrite, but it had a very different connotation at the time. See, it actually wasn't until the 1200s that this word entered into the English language, and it was largely because of this verse right here. Now, when it did, it took on the common meaning of hypocrite, one who advocates for behaviors they do not practice. You could think of celebrities advocating for climate change sensitivity while sailing the world in their fossil-fueled yachts. Sorry, Leo, that's just what came to mind, never mind. But obviously that's not exactly what's happening here. I mean, these people aren't advocating for something they're not doing. They're doing the thing. I mean, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that hypocrites had a very specific meaning in Greek. It referred to an actor or someone who played a role on a stage. You know, you can see how over time that translates into the English hypocrite. But here Jesus is talking about doing good in exchange for the role that comes with that act. So maybe a promotion or more authority, more privilege, maybe even respect. I mean, he talks specifically about public image in the next line. But this term, hypocrites, is directly related to the transaction of turning your performance into favorable outcomes. And that's important. Because if I pray and the driving motivation behind that prayer is, I want to be healed, or I want a new job, or I want a way out of this relationship, or I want someone to change because that would suit me better. And it doesn't actually really matter if anybody ever hears that prayer. I can still very easily slip over the line into thinking that the way I ask, or the nuance, the beauty of my words, the performance that I put on when I pray can swing God over to my side. As if the universe is as susceptible to sweet talk as we are. Now, does that mean we can't pray about those things? No. But anytime we find ourselves wondering if our prayer was good enough, that might be a sign that we slipped into this performative trap. It might be a sign that it's time to just sit back and remember, God already knows, so silence is golden, at least for this moment right now. There's actually been something quite healing about the moments where I've found myself here, realizing I'm putting on a show, times I've been able to stop myself mid-prayer and say, I get it. I see what's happening, I'm done. I'll just listen for the rest of this period. Making peace with the fact that you can't impress God goes a long way to making prayer feel viable for the long haul. So drop the act.